During this presentation today on Capitol Hill by survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse, his indicted crimes. This was a rare and bipartisan event. It was actually this briefing hosted by members of both parties, designed to empower the actual victims so that we might hear about Epstein's crimes and what should be done from people who tragically experienced them, rather than the so many other people we've heard from. And this comes after the Trump DOJ did systematically cut all of these people out of the recent changes and developments related to the case and hid key information from them. And so right off top, I want to tell you that makes today an unusual shift in this long-running story, where so often the spotlight has been on the pundits and the podcasters and the politicos and some conspiracy theorists talking on and on and on about the Epstein case, about the victims, about their supposed concern, even as, and you see our very deliberate contrast here on the screen, even as the Trump administration cuts these same people out instead of including them and hearing them and their view, the victim's view of what should be done in the quest for supposed transparency and justice. And I can tell you today, several are clear they oppose the Trump DOJ's secrecy and lenience, especially for Epstein co-conspirator Maxwell. Some also recounting their own experiences in public here for the first time.
I was only 14 years old when I met Jeffrey. A friend of mine in the neighborhood told me that I could make $300 to give an older guy a massage. It went from a dream job to the worst nightmare.
Epstein flew me to his private island. He listened to my dreams, promised to help, but his promises came with a catch. The abuse began. He told me to keep it secret.
Remember that even the first probe finally launched into Epstein, as you see there on the left where we say probe starts, that was short-circuited by a Republican prosecutor's secret deal in Florida, hidden from the same victims who are still speaking out, trying to be included and get justice today. And what you see here is the MAGA hypocrisy in the case goes for years, from Trump later promoting that same prosecutor who cut the Epstein deal to his cabinet, to his DOJ shutting down a real inquiry into Epstein's suspicious death under the custody of the Trump-appointed Bill Barr Bureau of Prisons and Justice Department. We've reported that in the timeline for you. The special treatment for Maxwell is the most obviously outrageous detail in all of this. Some of the victims today speaking about that. And many Republicans have mostly responded to this by pretending to take action in the case. That includes last night's congressional document dump, which was seeking headlines about transparency, but reflected mostly old recycled material. About 97% had already been released, according to House Democrats. Today's briefing was organized by lawmakers in both parties who have been working to override the House Republican lock on these issues. Most Republicans, while they've talked about this because they don't want to sound like they're doing nothing against Trump DOJ giving lenience to a sex trafficker, most Republicans have been doing that dance. Today, you had two members of both parties discussing the actual way this might go differently instead of pretending. And they are trying to circumvent the House Republican Speaker to force a vote to release what are still the hidden Epstein files, not the already released ones. They say they're just about 12 vote signatures technically short.
We're here not as partisans, we're here as patriots. The perpetrators are being protected because they're rich and powerful and political donors to the establishment here in Washington, D.C.
Maxwell's the only person who has ever been held accountable for Epstein-related crimes, convicted and sentenced to 20 years. And the DOJ, responding to all of this, did the one thing you could do to take a step backwards. They gave her a more lenient, better prison after a suspicious interview. It is remarkable, even in this climate we're in, even if you're a cynic, that the people who kept talking about Epstein justice, which includes the Attorney General Pam Bondi, have been the ones who've given lenience to this person mixed up in the sex trafficking. She's also clearly looking for more help from the administration. And there was a survivor today who spoke out about that suspicious Trump DOJ interview.
Her voice was elevated way before our voices were elevated here today. And that same calm, manipulative voice that she had so polite there that day with Todd Blanche was the same polite, coercive, manipulative voice that I heard as she was grooming me to then send me off to the home of Jeffrey Epstein where he would assault me. So her voice that day was the same voice that sent me off to a monster. I sat there and listened to this woman's voice lie. And there was no pushback from Todd Blanche because does he even have the facts to be able to push back?
Does that Trump appointee even have the facts? It's an important question. He doesn't have the background. And remember, the Justice Department, it has change in leadership at the top, but our government, every agency is supposed to have career, nonpartisan individuals in the middle and the bottom. So the top changes with administrations, but then you have all the other experts. They're explicitly supposed to be nonpartisan. That's why they're called career employees. They're not administration employees. And of course, the survivor there asks a very important question. Did that Trump appointee have the knowledge? No. The person with the most knowledge is the person who successfully prosecuted Maxwell, Ms. Comey, who was recently fired during all of this, which again raises questions. Why did this administration fire the person who actually busted the Epstein sex ring, not have them around for this interview, and then give Maxwell better treatment? That's the question. Now you might say, okay, Ari, what are you getting at? What's the answer? Well, we don't have reporting on why exactly they fired Ms. Comey because they didn't give a reason or a definition. We just know it was an unusual, suspicious firing at the same time that all this was going down, and she, of course, handled that case. But it's suspicious. We also know there are no known open cases regarding investigating this further. So going to a jailhouse interview for someone whose case Maxwell's is literally on appeal has no investigative purpose. Again, it raises questions whether this was an illicit, misleading attempt to shape her future testimony or clear Donald Trump, which raises a question, why would you need to go to such great lengths to clear someone? Another survivor today did bring up Donald Trump, and we've been very clear about this. There is not legal evidence in the public record that ties Donald Trump directly to these crimes. There's all sorts of consorting and social links, which raise questions about a conflict of interest or whether voters and citizens think it was unseemly how long they carried on a public relationship. But to be very fair and clear, before I even play the soundbite, there's not an allegation with evidence of Trump being criminally tied to this. And yet he was around. And so the victims have a right to speak out and recount that while they watch the person with the conflict of interest who promised transparency oversee a secretive approach to this case at DOJ. Take a listen.
The truth is, Epstein had a free pass. He bragged about his powerful friends, including our current president, Donald Trump. It was his biggest brag, actually. His biggest brag forever was that he was very good friends with Donald Trump. He had an 8x10 framed picture of him on his desk with the two of them. They were very close.
That's what these individuals remember during a period of time that was before Donald Trump went full-time into being a candidate and later being elected president. And so we've shown you that long multi-year relationship between Epstein and Trump. If you look, you can see it. Here you have, over those years, all that consorting. And so now the Epstein survivors are speaking out. And as Trump oversees a DOJ that both promised the country the Epstein client list, said it was on the Attorney General's desk, and then contradicted themselves and said it doesn't exist, as that is on the one side in the government, one of them today, one of these survivors says maybe they'll just get the information together and release their own client list.
I would like to announce here today, us Epstein survivors have been discussing creating our own list. We know the names. Many of us were abused by them. Now, together as survivors, we will confidentially compile the names we all know who were regularly in the Epstein world. And it will be done by survivors and for survivors. No one else is involved. Stay tuned for more details.
That's one of the pieces of news that came out of this, because if they are going to name names, if they're going to submit that material to the government or ultimately use it as leverage, as pressure to try to get any other documents released, that's a new development with the coordination, the network here of these survivors backed by members of both parties. So this is a real development. I want to tell you one more thing, and we've got our experts standing by, but what we're witnessing in public is a product of the failed, broken justice system in this case. And we've documented many aspects of that, including how the very first deal also cut out survivors and was struck in secret. But the corrective that we're seeing is not just theater for a MAGA podcast. The effort at this corrective is to do that which the justice system is supposed to do: an accounting of evidence, reliable witness and victim testimony, so that we might better understand what happened and how to prevent it. And when you deal with one of the most heinous crimes known to the world, as far back in world history, and one that's certainly rightfully punished that way, is when adults abuse children in this manner, minors or children. That's the pedophilia ring. That's the sex trafficking. And so it has taken this long with this much failure, spurred partly by the strange road of the Trump administration hyping this issue, claiming to care about it, and then doing more to help a sex trafficking co-conspirator than we've ever seen by any other administration at the federal level in the last 2 decades at least. That conflagration has brought these people out. And as you know, many of them did not want to be doing this. They didn't rush to do some big press conference. And this is coming because of those failures.